Hello and welcome to the Jackcast, your Swansea City podcast. I'm Matt Barocco and I'm joined as ever by Steve Carroll. Evening, Steve.
Evening.
Well, we've got 3 games to review since we last spoke to you. Hull, Leeds and Ipswich. First one up, Hull away, Steve. And we predicted we might get a positive result in those trio of games. And it came at the first time of asking. 1-0 win on the road, long awaited and desperately needed.
Yeah, absolutely. We did say, didn't we, that we felt a win could come over the next couple of weeks after our last podcast, because the Plymouth game, we did create a lot of chances, and it was one of those days, really, wasn't it, where we didn't take them and we've ended up losing, but we played significantly worse earlier in the season, and it was one of our better performances. So it did suggest that a similar type of performance over the next couple of weeks, and we would end up on the right end of the result as well. And that's what happened, really. So you'd have to say it's probably our best result of the season, and you can't really argue that we didn't deserve it either. I thought we played well on the day, and a really well earned 3 points, and obviously a vital one as well.
Yeah, it's quite ironic, really, that a week after getting undone by a corner routine, we score the winning goal in the only goal of the game. In fact, we actually win a game with the same method.
Yeah, exactly. It's like we took the hint, wasn't it, that actually you can be innovative with corners on times, and obviously we've taken a short one. Cullen's made a nice run. I think there was a block from Fulton, and obviously you've still got to get it right. There's still got to be a good finish, isn't it, and stuff like that, which it was. And I think that's got to be a good thing, trying a little bit of innovation, isn't it? Because the bog standard stuff of the ball in the box. I'm not saying that it doesn't work or anything like that, but the odd one here and there like that can just catch somebody off guard, really, can't it? And I think that's what happened. And obviously we were a victim of it the week before. And on this occasion, we came out on top. So, good work, really, from the coaching staff to think of something, and it's paid off, hasn't it?
It has. And it was nice to see as well that, the way the players fought. As you said, Steve, I thought we were good value for the 3 points, and we were competitive and professional throughout, which, really speaking, is not something we've been able to say too often this season. We didn't really have that big section of the game where we were creating all our own problems like we had previously. Yeah,
exactly. I mean, we had a fair amount of the ball, didn't we? Particularly in the first half, and we created a few chances, didn't we? And we really restricted the opposition. That was one of the most impressive things about it, because we'll come on to other games because we have to. But we've been too easy to score against in a lot of games, and we've given up a lot of chances. But we didn't really do that, did we, at Hull? We were far better, I would say, and it was a real step in the right direction, and it was against a good side. I mean, you look at it, they've brought in some really exciting players during the January transfer window, and the type of deals that we could only dream of, really. And it didn't, for them to have, for us to have done a number on them, I should say, and for it not to be a case of particularly lucky or anything like that is really encouraging. I don't feel that we were lucky to win that game at all. And you'd have thought that maybe to end this poor run that we've been on, you might need a little bit of luck or something like that, a decision to go for you. But it didn't really work out that way, did it?
No. I thought, by and large, we saw the game out well, and it was a real lift for everyone to see the fruits of the labour, really, wasn't it? And I think we came away from that thinking, do you know what? I think we'll be okay. And of course, then to tail off what has been a horrendous run of fixtures to start off Luke Williams' time at the club, we followed it up with games at home, a double-header, Leeds and Ipswich. Added to the fact that you've got 2 of the best teams in the league this season, and the fact that our home record has been pretty dismal, you were thinking if you could really turn up against Leeds, Steve, and really give them a good game. They haven't had the most emphatic record on the road themselves, and maybe we can see where we go with it. But it was one of the poorest performances, wasn't it? It was naive. it was without real ideas of how to combat Leeds' pace on the counter-attack. It was gifting them goals after goals and chance after chance.
Yeah, I think that's the problem. It was naive, really, wasn't it? That's probably a good way of describing it. And look, I think we've got to be realistic about where we're at the moment, and probably about where the division is. I mean, there's 4 teams out there that are, you know, at the top end of the table, and they're streets ahead of everybody else. I know 3 of them obviously are on parachute payments with significantly bigger budgets than everybody else. And then there's one that, to be fair, are pulling out miracles and you know, in a lot of other seasons would be a shoe-in for automatic promotion, but may well not get it this year. So very unlucky, really. But I know Williams has tried to play this high line, hasn't he, in our games since he's come in, against Leeds. Incredibly risky, not just the fact that they're a good side, but they are a side with a lot of pace. I mean, Nonto obviously gave us a torrid time, didn't he? And I think the issue is, you look at, I'm not going to say that we can be like Man City or anything like that, but when they play a high line, they've got Kyle Walker, who's got a lot of pace, and they've got Edison sitting on the edge of the box that can sweep up the ball over the top, so nobody can really get in. And I mean, I think you need those type of attributes then, really, if you're going to play like a high line to basically allow you to get away with it. So the fact that we don't have that meant that we were, you know, playing into the opposition's hands, really. And that's what happened. I think for me, what we should have done is sat 10 yards deeper, just because of the threat, certainly in the first half anyway, to try and, you know, stay in the game a bit longer. You know that good opposition are always going to create good chances against us. But, yeah, I mean, we were just chasing early on, weren't we? And, you know, it just felt like every time Leeds went forward, it was quite terrifying, really, wasn't it? The game seemed to be played a lot in our own half. I mean, there was even the instance, wasn't there, where we got a corner, I think we tried a bit of innovation again, cocked it up. And the next thing you know, Leeds were on the attack, and you're thinking, oh my God, it's going to be another goal here. So, yeah, it was a tough watch, wasn't it? I mean, when we played Leeds at home in the past, there've been some really memorable games, really. I mean, the one before we were born, where we've won 5-1, probably one of the greatest days that we've ever had as a club. That great 3-2 game in League One, 3-0 when we went up to the Prem that year. When we came down, there was like the rebirth with all the youngsters in the team, and we drew 2-2, but we could have given them a game there as well. So like, there've been some really enjoyable games with Leeds, I would say, but that one was by far the worst. I mean, it was just miserable, wasn't it? You could feel the gulf between us, and, you know, being 2 down early on again, it's just depressing, isn't it? I mean, I know the likes of me and you have got season tickets, but there'll be a few people that as walk-ups who've paid for that, and they're thinking they paid 30 odd quid and we're out of it in minutes. And, you know, it's not going to encourage people to come back down, is it?
No, it's not. And I do understand your thing about the top of the division this season is probably stronger than I've ever seen it, and probably stronger than most have ever seen it. You'll get runaway teams that break records. Think back to like when Reading broke points records in this division and stuff like that. And you had the Fulhams as well with Mitrovic breaking all sorts of records recently. But this year, to have 3, and you could argue 4 if you include Ipswich having come up from League One, straight storming the Championship themselves, very much still in with a shout of automatics. It's unheard of. It's 4 teams pulling away, and Leeds very much the form one of those 4, flying into up into the autos. So you've got to deal with that. But other teams, Steve, have given them a much tougher time of it. I'm not saying we should be beating Leeds and their current rate of form and the quality they've got, but we should be making it harder for them. We should have come in with a game plan. How are we going to play against them? When all said and done, I think that from Daniel Farke would think that is probably a gift wrap for him. They never had to break sweat. They haven't had to get out of second gear. He hasn't had to take on any injuries or any risk of suspensions or anything like that, because they just coasted it from the first minute to the last and bullied us. If we'd lost that one in the manner in which, let's think of some recent games we played against the top teams. Southampton, in the second half, we had 2 or 3 chances, just ball wouldn't go in, and it would have changed the game. And we could have really pushed the threat onto them. Leicester away, Steve, you recall that one. Again, really positive spells during the game, and then one defensive cock up, and the game's gone. And that was at 1-0, and you're thinking, we're still in this at 1-0. Leeds, we never give ourselves a shot. So, yes, there is a definite gulf, and there's definitely, look at the quality of the bench and stuff like that, which is always a good tell now that you're allowed to make so many subs. But you've got to be more professional than that. It felt like an FA Cup game against Premier League against non-league minnows, and that's probably being kind to our defence.
Yeah, it is. I mean, obviously we discussed the Leicester and the Southampton games there, and I do think that in the second half against Southampton we did step it up. And to be fair, against Leicester, early on they had chances, but again there were signs of that we didn't play too badly there. But the problem is, in all of those games, we've conceded early, haven't we? And we did the same at Bournemouth. I know we rested a few people, but we're just giving ourselves a mountain to climb early on. That's the problem. And I do feel like as well, I highlighted this after, I think it was after the Leeds game the other day, our record against the sides that have won promotion over the last few years. And I could not believe how bad it is. I think I worked it out. It was like in 18 fixtures, it's one draw. And that draw was against Bournemouth when we were 3-0 up and they come back to 3. So that's the worst draw you can have, isn't it? Pretty much. The other 17 all ended in defeat. There were, I think we've scored 12 and conceded 58, which is just ridiculous. It just suggests that if we go a couple down, that that we cave in and then people batter us. I mean, we're just not competing. That's what I can't stand. I've got some stats in front of me here as well, right? I've got a friend that supports Bristol City, and because I said to him how bad our record was, he couldn't believe it. So he came back to me with some stats himself. Now I think there's one of the promoted club or sides. There's one of the top 3 currently that they haven't played yet this season. So for them it's 17 fixtures. Now they've only won 2 and they've only drawn 2 and lost 13. But the big difference for me was that all the defeats, apart from one where Fulham gave them a pasting, were only by 1 goal. I think it's conceded 27 and scored 16. Now they've conceded, less than half the amount that we have. I know the results haven't been so good, but that tells you that they are competing. We are not competing, are we?
So, and this comes back to the big issue, which is something we discussed previously in Fits and Starts, but it is becoming as clear as day that this is a psychological issue. It's a mentality issue. We're going into these games. Someone put up a record of the timings of the goals we conceded in the last 10, 12 games. So we've almost hit every minute from the first through to the 15th. We're conceding ridiculous amounts of goals in the first 15 minutes of games, every game. And it just a constant, I mean, we were standing next to each other in the stadium the other day, weren't we? You were watching me try to put a bet on Ipswich to score in the first 10 minutes. As it happens, they scored in the 12th. So doesn't it come to that in a minute? But it's just become an ongoing theme with the Swans where we are almost defeated before a ball is kicked. And we have no mentality. Where's the leaders? Where's the characters that's going to drag these players up off the turf when the chips are down, when the opposition have got momentum? Who's going to drag us up? Who's going to pull us up the pitch and make us more competitive? Give us a bit of bite. You see sometimes when Joe Allen comes on the pitch, you almost forget what we're missing sometimes until Joe Allen comes on, and then you see straight away he gets into a crunching tackle. Free kick goes the other way. He's up at the ref screaming about another decision which didn't go our way. And you're thinking, yes, that's what you want. You want your players to fight for every ball. You want them to fight for every decision. If you think there's an injustice, you don't want them to hang their heads and go trudging back to the penalty area. You want them to go and make the point. You want them to go and fight for the badge, fight for the shirt. First and foremost, quality is one thing. We can talk all night about the lack of quality and how the squad has got weaker and weaker and weaker season on season. But what you can never excuse is a lack of effort. And it's been too many times this season where I think those players just do not believe at any point that they can win that game of football. And that's not acceptable. It's just not acceptable.
Well, I'm wondering certainly in these games as well, as if they almost think to themselves, oh, well, we're losing here. I mean, everyone expects us to lose because of who we're playing. So, we're not going to get pelters if we don't lose. But, it's getting to the point now where you think eventually, surely you have to, do well against these teams and get the odd result, compete with them. I mean, let's be honest about it. When we got relegated from the Prem, it was pretty miserable, wasn't it? But I still remember when we managed to beat Liverpool. It was a bit of a fluke, don't get me wrong. But it was a backs to the wall and we defended well. We made it tough, didn't we? And exactly, but we beat Arsenal then as well, didn't we? I think that was literally about the week after or something. So even though we were crap, we still did manage to pull a couple of results off. But with this, we're not at all, are we? I'm quite glad you mentioned Joe Allen, because particularly I felt when he came on against Leeds, he looked like a player that was angry to me, probably angry that we're crap, and also he's probably thinking, isn't he, like, we're crap and I can't get in this team. Like, what's going on? And thinking, I want to play. Because he put the boot in, didn't he? Then he had to go to the ref about something. But it did just, to be fair, Joe Allen is someone that does that, but obviously we're forgetting about the fact that he's had a great career, and mainly it's the fact that he's on the ball, his passing, everything like that. That's where his main strength is. But even though he is that, and he's only like a smaller guy, go on, he'll put the boot in, won't he? So, I was pleased then that he did end up starting on Saturday. I felt that was long overdue, and particularly after the Leeds thing, where we were so bad and he was getting the boot in. I'm glad that he did get an opportunity to start. But it just shames some of the other players then, doesn't it? I mean, it's tough, isn't it? I mean, I'm even looking at Grimes recently and thinking, I'm not saying that he's not trying at all, but I mean, he seems badly out of form. I mean, I thought he was poor again in the game that will come on to talk with Ipswich. I mean, I'm almost looking at him and thinking, you could be close to being taken out of the team here, which in general is, unthinkable given how vital he's been the last 2 years. But I am looking at him and thinking, I'm not sure that you should definitely be in the team the way you're carrying on. And sometimes stuff like that is just a kick up the backside, and it can actually provoke a bit of a performance, can't it? So, but yeah, I mean, I think that shows where we're at, doesn't it?
It's indicative of the issues we have, and look, everyone waxes lyrical about Grimes and his character behind the scenes and stuff like that, and I have no qualms about that at all. But again, on the pitch, like, I think when I see him, I think like someone like Harry Darling is a much more vocal leader out there, in terms of, you need someone with those natural abilities. I just don't see in Grimes, in the chips are down, I don't see him rallying the troops. So you talked to me on the Leeds game, and I remember you saying, I mean, you apoplectic about Bashir Humphrey's positioning and coming out.
Lucky I haven't mentioned that yet.
Well, listen, let's get on to it, because he's covering right back. It's a position he's obviously played in a couple times before when we've been short on numbers, but he's covering on the sides of the defence and having to marshal a very pacey attacking lead setup, and he is constantly pulling himself out of position. His discipline was abysmal. His positional discipline was all over the shop. But then I'm looking at that and I'm thinking, and I know this is an idealistic world, okay? But I'm thinking, if Ashley Williams was in defence there, in the centre of defence, he'd have grabbed him by the scruff of his neck and dragged him back to position and let him know in no uncertain terms, you stay in your place. You drifting up into the centre mid when Leeds have got the ball, and all of a sudden there's 60 yards of space down the left-hand side, is no use to us whatsoever. In fact, it's costing us time and time and time again. And so, where is the leader on the pitch then to really galvanise the troops, really let players know what they need to be doing in the game management? So, look, I'm not, because obviously that is me, I'm almost saying like Grimes is to blame for Humphreys. He's not. Humphreys needs to be a lot better. And I've thought that for a long time. But there is a certain lack of leadership and a certain lack of character in the Swansea City team. And I'll say something, Steve, which I might get pelters for. Fine if I do. But in terms of my time supporting the Swans, looking at the last 28, 29 years, I think this might be one of the least likeable group of players. And I say that, it's hard to say that, but there's not many players I would be gutted about if they left in the summer. And that is a real damning sense of where we're at right now. I don't really feel an affinity to many of them at all.
Yeah, I think that is, I can't say I disagree that much with that. I mean, I look at the last couple of years in the Prem and sort of felt similar. I mean, I always remember on the final day, Fabianski getting
Fabianski and Leon and stuff like that.
He got the "We want you to stay" chant, didn't he? I think he was quite emotional about it. But the main thing I took from it was, the rest of you better be listening to this, because you're not getting this chant. Because most of us probably are thinking, off you go on, you took us down. So, and I think you'd look back to, there have been a few other relegations since we've been supporting the club. I mean, I remember under John Hollins we went down, and I can't say I was overly fussed on a lot of those players in terms, but that was more of an ability thing, if that makes sense. But they were good lads, if that makes sense. They weren't someone that I felt was, I didn't feel there was a lack of tries in that team. I just felt it wasn't good enough. And that when we'd gone up the year before, that we needed to strengthen, for example, and we didn't. So understandably, back down we came. I mean, like I said, I didn't rate some of those players, but I don't think they'd let us down as such. Whereas I think some of this lot maybe are at times. So I think that's the difference, isn't it? I mean, you can go back to the other thing with the Prem now. Gomez and Montero were two of my biggest hatreds. Not because they weren't good enough. They couldn't be asked, could they, half the time? And I think that's what really drives you up the wall. And I think, I don't know, some of this lot, they're not... are they busting a gut for us at times? I think you do have to wonder with some. And like you said, I think leadership is... I don't think there are so many leaders in football anymore, because I just think that the whole... it's just, the game has changed. People haven't, everyone's been like mollycoddled and hasn't had to go through tough times as such, like they would have done years ago. I mean, there's, I'm not saying that the stuff like the chores that the youngsters used to have to do for the first team were necessarily, or all of that was good, but I think some of it, like cleaning the boots of people, probably was. So I think that's the issue now. Everyone now, right? Like, especially if you're a good player, like Ewan Morgan's not kicked the ball, but Brentford paid, a fee for him, and it'll rise to over $1 million, I think. And they've probably offered him a nice place to live, all this type of thing. I mean, the guy's never kicked the ball. So I think that's sort of where it's a footballing issue in general, if you know what I mean. I think the characters are probably the ones that are playing lower down. I mean, Ashley Williams is a good example. I mean, someone that has seen real life because he came into the game a bit later after being released. I think he'd worked a few random jobs, hadn't he? And I think those people are always going to have a bit more leadership and maybe appreciation than others, really. So, but yeah, you just don't see many of them. I think even in the Prem line, there's not those real type of, there aren't many Roy Keanes or John Terrys or Steven Gerrards out there, if that makes sense.
But I think every team has, I mean, maybe not a Roy Keane to that extent, but you still have your Van Dijks. You still have the players there that are vocal, that try and pick, and your successful teams will have that. They'll have your respected players there where they'll look to, and they'll be like, right, come on, lift your heads up kind of thing, and we'll get back into this and stuff. But I guess it's more spread out now in the successful teams. Everyone takes the ownership of responsibility to have that leadership quality in a successful team. A lot of the players have that inbuilt into them, makes them winners, makes them better players, because they already built into them, into their makeup. I feel like none of our players have it, Steve. I'm looking at maybe, like I said, the only one in the squad I would perhaps think may do well with the captain's armband on is Harry Darling, because I think perhaps he would be that sort of character in that situation. But everyone else I'm looking around, I'm thinking, it's just too easy. It's too passive. Teams get an easy ride against the Swans. If, let's say, for example, we're winning a game, I can't remember the last time, but we win the game and we have to defend the Alamo. Teams are really going for it and they're coming at us. We're having to have a lot of luck and a lot of good goalkeeping to keep us ahead. And when we are losing a game, teams have an easy ride. And the games we have lost, you can just see the games peter out into nothingness. And Leeds was probably the worst of this because of the lack of fight and battle and belief in the squad for that one. But yeah, seen so many times over the last few years, Steve, where you're just looking at it going, when teams have the lead against us, there's no one there really leading the surge. You know what I mean? Really pulling it. And perhaps let's look at other players. Like when you mentioned just now about when we came down, then we had characters and we had players that cared, and we look at the likes of Ollie McBurney and stuff like that. And they really, he had that kind of bit between his teeth, and he's another person who could galvanize and lead from the front, as opposed from the back. So, I think they're out there, but I think it's more about, rather than having one player now who is responsible for that in a team, you have that quality in a player's makeup. And we don't have really anyone who's playing regularly who has that in their DNA,
Yeah, I think the other thing sometimes is you look at the younger players, for example, don't you, if they've come through the system. I mean, I know McBurney didn't come through at a very young age, but we did buy him young. And like I said, he did have that bit of quality. I'd look at Connor Roberts if he was still here as somebody that would... that would be like that. I'm not sure he'd be so vocal elsewhere. Mind, I don't know is the honest answer, but I certainly felt that for us that he was a bit of a leader. I mean, if he was still here now, I mean, he would have had a chance of the captaincy. Probably would have been the vice captain at least anyway. But so I think that would help. I think if we could bring some more of those younger players through, and there's just more of a feeling for it then, isn't it? I mean, I think we talked about it before, didn't we? When we did go down, that when we then had, you know, the bulk of the team was those younger players, it felt like, you know, the club was more relatable again, players that we liked, and I think we'd all be a little bit more patient with them because we knew they were experienced, but they weren't going to let us down in terms of commitment and effort. They were going to be, you know, do their best, and a lot of them as well wanted to be here. I think that was the other thing, whereas you think a lot of this lot, I don't know how bothered they really are, if you know what I mean. I think that's the other thing. I think we're crying out for a bit of a hero type figure, aren't we? We're, like, who's our crowd favourite? It's a really good question because
it's our on-loan goalkeeper, I think.
Yeah, it probably is, isn't it? You know, and that's the thing. We're crying out for someone that could just be a bit of a hero. I think if Joe Allen was playing regularly, it could be him. But yeah, we don't really have one, do we? I mean, you mentioned McBurney there. I mean, could all dream he's out of contract in the summer. I don't think we'd get him back, but you do never know. I mean, it's crying out for something like that, I think, where someone comes in that just gives everyone that little bit of a lift, isn't it? But yeah, you know, as you say, I think it is a reasonably unlikable Swans team, and I think obviously there'll be some departures in the summer, as we know, and I don't think too many of them would be. But I think the more damning thing would be if we were to get relegated, which I must be honest, I don't think we will. I think there's 3 worse teams, but a lot of this lot ain't getting moves. That's the truth of it, if you know what I mean. So that is another thing about it. Not only are they particularly, you know, they may be players that we're not hugely fussed on, they're actually not brilliant either, which makes it even worse.
Yeah, spot on. I did think of another example of the leadership thing as well. When you take the Wales situation, when Ramsey was given the captaincy and then had it taken off and given to Ashley Williams, far more natural leader in his DNA. And then, of course, later on, you had Gareth Bale, another exact example of where you have that winning mentality, that never say die attitude. It's built in your DNA. There's the guy you want there.
Yeah. Bale's a bit of a funny one, I think, because I would say that I think international football, a lot of this happens, doesn't it, where the best player gets it. I don't always agree, but I do think in Bale's case it's a little bit different because how Bale would lead is in terms of he would always turn up without a doubt. And quite often he wouldn't have been playing for Real Madrid, or he may have had a knock or something, but he'd always be there. And that was setting the example. But club-wise, I mean, he would never have ever have had the captaincy, would he? It's kind of a strange one in that way, isn't it?
But he was always more for Wales than 100%. So you would see with Wales, he'd be throwing himself into 50-50s, had no chance of winning in terms of, he could come off hurt, he could come off, you know, with a booking and stuff like that, but he would never give anything less than 100%. And that sort of leadership, that sort of attitude, that can lift others around you. And rightly so that Ramsey had it removed from him because he wasn't that character. He's not that character. He's a fantastic technical player and has been for his whole career. But in a similar vein to Grimes in some respects, you look at him going, he's fantastic technically, but is he really going to grab it by the scruff of the neck? Does Ashley Williams grab people off the deck? Yes, he did for his career, especially with us. And then Gareth Bale is an epitome of that for Wales, where he is a sort of player that if things aren't going his way, he'll drop deep into defensive midfield, pick the ball up, and he will go like the clappers up the pitch with the ball and try and force the issue. And that's the sort of, you know what I mean when I say a true leader and they're in their DNA. I think we are really lacking that. And I know I've harped on about this, but you just see your heads drop so easily with this Swans team.
Yeah, I think that it is certainly an issue. It's not an issue that's going to be particularly easy to correct either, I don't think. Yeah, you're sort of hoping that, you know, sometimes people become like leaders. I would say that Leon was someone that became a leader. I wouldn't say that he was maybe when he was younger, like the natural type. But I remember that story of when we were struggling in the Premier, he gave everyone a DVD of Jack to a King, didn't he? And said, look, sit down and watch this. You need to realise that, you know, we haven't always had it that good down here. It's been some tough times. And I don't think a younger Leon would have done that, if you know what I mean. But then you get, you know, people do grow into it a little bit. And I think where maybe we need one or two to to do that as well. And I mean, I would say that Joe Allen is potentially a leader in this, probably in a similar sort of way, if you know what I mean, more the setting and example type maybe than the ranting and raver. But I mean, the fact is as well, because Joe has had such a successful career, it would be impossible to not have respect for him if, you know, you're someone that takes football seriously, because, you know, you don't win the amount of international caps that he's had, played in 3 major tournaments, obviously played for Liverpool for 4 seasons, must have played 100 games for him at least. And, you know, command respect. So, yeah, there's certainly something with him, but obviously if he's not playing, that doesn't help either, does it?
That's it. I mean, he's the ideal scenario, but he does not get the minutes. He'd be a shoo-in for captaincy for me, because not only does he have that respect, but also, he leads by example, not just in his attitude, but in his performance as well. And we talked about when he came on against Leeds, where he was throwing himself in, getting in the rest base, and that kind of, do you know what? Yeah, we're 3-0 down at home to Leeds. We haven't laid a scratch on them, but that got a bit of reaction from the fans, and fans love to see their players try for the shirt. And you'll never say Joe Allen doesn't give his all for the shirt, whether he's got 90 minutes in him or whether he can play 2-3 games in a week now, I don't know. And he hasn't been doing that for us. But in terms of attitude and leading by example, Joe's a perfect example of what we are missing on the pitch in most of our games. And it's sad to see, because it is so easy to get in underneath our skin and hurt us, and there's no coming back. So, it's loads of issues to go with the Swans, Steve, and I think that is one of them that needs to be addressed. But I think looking ahead to the summer, there is so much work to do. It's just going to be an absolute ball ache to get us into a sort of state where we can be competitive next year. It
is, but the problem is, as things stand, the man overseeing it is the man who oversaw last summer, which was a disaster. So Paul Watson needs to go. That's the simple truth of it. I mean, you know, we have to have alignment at this football club. We've got to have people on the same page. I mean, from my point of view, I don't think that Watson wanted to appoint Williams. I mean, he appointed Duff when he could have appointed Chris Davis and chose not to. Watson believes in a Luton type of way. Now, from my point of view, he would have appointed Nathan Jones if he could have got away with it, but he couldn't. So he probably would have appointed Sheehan, which I know Sheehan's results weren't bad, but the performances were crap. I've got far more faith in Luke Williams than I ever did Sheehan. But the problem is, if everybody isn't aligned behind the scenes and on the same page, you're just going to run into problems. And in the end, somebody is going to end up being a fall guy. I mean, maybe Josh Marsh has become a fall guy now because he's gone. It wouldn't shock me at all if they try and pin the summer on him, for example. But yeah, we have to all be on the same page. For me, the sporting director needs to be someone that believes in the Swansea way. I mean, so if he doesn't, then you're always going to struggle, because behind the scenes they're going to be disagreeing on who we should bring in, aren't they? And stuff like that, if you know what I mean. So, yeah, Watson did some terrible business in the summer. He has to go. It's as simple as that. Why he's still here, I have no idea.
There'll be a civil war behind the scenes, because you've got Watson that's come in, and he came in for the summer just gone, and he's appointed Duff in a change of direction, has spent a lot of money, a lot of which we won't recoup because the players haven't lived up to the price tags that we spent, and clearly overspent on certain players. But now that Andy Coleman and co have changed their minds and gone back to the Russell Martin mould in Luke Williams, this is a clear disjoint situation now, where you've got the old school, or rather the alternative Swansea method, which was coming in the summer with Duff, and going back to type of what we know was successful for us. We're bringing in Luke Williams and trying to get us back to playing that sort of purist football. Now we haven't got those two things aligned. Even though Duff was a failure here, the sporting director and Duff was somewhat aligned on their values. Now that's not the case anymore. There has to be a meeting point here whereby hard decisions are made. I will back Luke Williams until the day he walks out of this club, because he is absolutely the right man for us and for us to get back the way we do. But he needs to be supported, and supported in the right way. And that does mean aligning his values with the people who are going to be making the signings to make us competitive again. And yes, that does mean that the old guard need to go. And Paul Watson coming in, making a whole host of mistakes in the summer. I don't know if you caught up, Steve. There was a rumour, and I can only say speculate as a rumour, what went round on the weekend after the Ipswich game, in that Paul Watson was spotted by Swansea fans in town. Again, can't verify this, but the rumour has it that they had a conversation or a debate and a lot of waffle was spoken. All of this is kind of building up into a certain crescendo, isn't it? Where you expect there has to be, it can no longer continue in the way it is. It has to meet at the point now where you go, right, something needs to happen and happen soon.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, we can't get to the summer in a similar situation. I mean, we've got to all be on the same page. It is as simple as that, really. So, we've got a manager needs to be in charge of transfers in general, unless you've got a sporting director that is 100% with him. I mean, you look at MK Dons. I mean, when obviously Williams was there with obviously as assistant to Russell Martin, I think they had Liam Sweeten as the director of football. They all brought in, they were aligned on players, and they brought in a lot of players that did really well, and then they sold. Obviously, we bought one of them in Harry Darlin. I mean, I'm not going to mention Fisher, for God's sake. But, I mean, Scott Swine was one, wasn't he? Another
Matt
one.
O'Reilly.
Yeah, Matt O'Reilly. Yeah, they all, they all excelled, didn't they? And they made a lot of money off that. And it's because they were all on the same page, essentially. And down here, we've not been like that for a while. I mean, Martin, as we know, wanted O'Reilly here. He wanted Ogben, and it was refused. And you look at the consequences of that now. That could have been players that were really good for us, and also that would have made us money as well. So that's the problem. Whereas the ones that have come in last summer, I mean, who the hell is making us money from that? I mean, what Watson has done is scandalous, really. I mean, absolutely horrific business. And I can't believe that anyone can genuinely defend it. It is ridiculous. We've got to get back to, people being on the same page. And also, as we know, like trying to create assets. I mean, I know there was criticism of the way that we didn't back Russell Martin, and they certainly did stitch him up, particularly in January. But the idea of having one out, one in general, is a good idea, but you can always make the odd exception here and there. I mean, the problem with January last year was it was 5 out and none in, wasn't it? So, we've got to run the club sensibly. I mean, the fact is now we've got 20 odd players on the books. I think it's close to late 20s, and that's not including the ones out on loan, like Pedersen and Jawa On, or whatever his name is. And they're all meant to be regarded as first team players. I mean, surely the sensible thing is to have about 22 players, and then the rest covered up with youngsters. So you're up at about 25, really. And then obviously if you get an issue, you can try and bring somebody in to cover that issue with an injury or something like that. But I mean, we've just got too many players. But the problem is, it's not like it's not like that nice problem to have, is it? Whereas, who are we going to play in terms of, or who are we going to leave out? Just like, who am I picking?
Yeah, I think that's the biggest issue, isn't it? It'd be an embarrassment of riches if you had this huge squad and you go, well, someone's going to be disappointed today. It's hard to pick a strong 11, and that is a damning sign of where we're at. We have regressed in our squad quality and stuff like that. We'll carry on this conversation in a few short minutes after we just discussed the final game of the trio, which is Ipswich. And I say that because we did have an appearance of one of those summer signings, those long lost summer signings in this game. This one, it was another defeat, Steve, but it wasn't like Leeds, in the sense of a complete downing of tools and a misery. But, it's another defeat ultimately, isn't it?
Yeah, we definitely played better. I think we could have had something from this game, but I mean, I think the general issue is, again, as usual, conceded goals too early and too easily. I mean, you can't be chasing the game early on. I mean, like I say, you were joking with me that trying to put a bet on us conceded in the first 15 or something like that. I know you weren't successful, but if you were, then obviously you would have won again on that, because that's what's happened, isn't it? And we've got, can we just stay in the game till half time or stay level or something? I think that's maybe the way we need to look at it now, because it's just getting a bit ridiculous, isn't it? But, we didn't play too badly. Yates finally managed to get a goal, first one in ages. Has to be a good thing. I didn't think he was brilliant in general, again, mine, but still, it wouldn't do his confidence any harm with it. But, I mean, at that point then, we had a little bit of momentum, didn't we? It's 1-1. obviously we've just scored, the crowd are up, and then, Ipswich have got a free kick, I think it was an hour and a half, and the move has led to them scoring what's ended up being the decisive goal, and you just think, this is bloody typical. We were in the ascendancy at that point, and we've undone it and, gifted them a goal, haven't we?
Yeah, it was so soon after us as well. We can see the two things, as Fonzie said to you, is we concede early and we concede just after we've scored. That's just what happens, isn't it? I mean, it's so frustrating because you just think, right, now's a chance, and we just switch off. We switch off the first 10 minutes of games. We're not in a game after the first 15 minutes. It's already away from us. And also, once we score, do not concede just after you've scored. We have to work so hard to score a goal. And exactly what you said there, we on the ascendancy, we've managed to grab the equaliser. We rushed the ball back to the halfway line, and we've kept coming at Ipswich. And you're thinking, just be measured in this approach. Do not get caught by a sucker punch. And the first time that Ipswich went into our half after we scored, they've scored again. So it really does, it's a real kick in the teeth for us. And when you really pour us at the defensive end and you can't stick the ball in the net enough times at the other end, it's a recipe for disaster. And unfortunately, we weren't able to claw back an equaliser. And it does put us in a bit of a position, really, Steve, doesn't it? I mean, let's not shake it up. I do think that these were the hardest games that a manager could come into, and he would have really wouldn't have wished those sort of fixtures on your worst enemy. But I do think I'm disappointed in the fact that we haven't, in some of those games, done a bit more and forced the issue a little bit more. We've got caught by sucker punch after sucker punch, but we don't seem to be learning those lessons.
No, we don't. I think that's the issue, isn't it? I mean, undoubtedly we've had a horrible run of fixtures. I mean, you can't dispute that any other way. And I mean, the fact is we're still clear of the bottom army by the bottom three, I should say, by 4 points. And there can't be anybody else that has played the top four twice, is it? I mean, you look at after, what's going to happen on Saturday, we'd have played most of the top 10 twice. I mean, it feels absurd, really, the way that the fixture list has fallen. But, the fact is the opportunity will be there then for things to improve. We wouldn't have thought we're going to get punished in the way that we have done for the type of mistakes that we've been making. So you'd like to think that we will now improve, but at the same time, I mean, you've got to do it, haven't you? So you can't just, assume that that things are going to pick up. We've got to learn some harsh lessons, really, haven't we? And quickly, because it just feels as if we're too easy to score against.
Yeah, 100%. And the negative thing is sometimes you see. Remember this? Do you remember the season when we stayed up against Hull on the final day from Division 3? And I think due to issues with the pitch and whatnot, I think Shrewsbury ended up having something like 6 or 7 games in hand on us. And I think the only point they picked up in the last 15 games or so was against us.
I remember that. I think what happened with Shrewsbury was they had a nice little cup run. So obviously then they had those games in hand. But I think we went up there in about early April time, and they still had about 2 games in hand on us at that point. And you're thinking, there's not that much of the season left at that point.
And I think the issue where I'm going to draw this back to now is losing and accepting defeat is a really, really nasty habit to get into. And sometimes you can look ahead to brighter times and think, okay, well, those fixtures are a little bit kinder. And they are. When you get to April, we've got teams that are below us in the league. There's not too many that are below us anymore, but there are teams that are below us. We have got favourable fixtures towards the end of the season where you think, right, well, those are games we can target, go all out and win those games because they will be 6-pointers. And also they're very winnable games from our perspective. But it's a nasty habit to get into when you're losing and you're expecting to lose and the morale is low and stuff like that. And it is something that you need to snap out of sooner rather than later, because you do see situations where teams think, oh, they'll be fine, they'll get out of it, and they just don't. And they just keep missing opportunities to pick up points. So I'm a million miles away from pressing the panic button yet, but I do want to see us, start picking up. We got the Bristol and Cardiff coming up shortly, and I think those sorts of games as well, those sorts of they can change the mood of a season, can't they? Those sorts of games. And
well, they did last year. That's a way of looking at it. I mean, it is quite weird how, like, you look at the fixtures and then, like, the next cluster of games really are still against teams that, you know, this the sort of mid-table, lower mid-table, and then most of the ones that are against the lower teams, certainly the current bottom four, they all come after Easter then, or should I say, like, I think we've got Sheffield Wednesday and QPR as a double header at Easter. So it is strange how, you know, the fixture list does basically it goes from like the top sides and then it sort of slowly works its way down the table really. So, you know, it's mainly the mid-table sides that we've got coming out. But look, there's chances for points. That's what the main thing is. And you'd like to think we did, like I say, against Plymouth, we did play quite well. We did against Hull, that was encouraging as well. So those type of performances against, you know, the lesser sides will see us win points. So, you know, I don't think we need to worry. I think there's, you know, we're closer to the bottom than we should be because of the fixtures that we've had. But I think it's just the general decline, isn't it, that we're seeing, and the feeling that we're on the wrong track. It might get worse. And, you know,
are you talking about season on season here?
Yeah, well, yeah, really.
Yeah.
And, you know, I think Gitto, obviously, who used to join us regularly, he wrote a piece in my latest fanzine about how there's similarities this season, really, with 2015-16. I think that's spot on, because you look at it and think, you know, we had
okay this year, but next year.
we had, obviously, we had to make a managerial change, and we ballsed it up for a while, and then before eventually getting somebody in. But it really did feel like there's enough to get away with it, which we did. But you're also looking and thinking, we're on slippery slope here. We need to do good transfer business in the summer then. And obviously, we know what happened. We could have had Brendan Rodgers. We didn't. We could have had Joe Allen back. We didn't. And, yeah, it was a slippery slope, really, from there, wasn't it? So, you know, and I think this summer could sort of be a similar thing where if we make more mistakes in the transfer market, I think we really could be in a bit of trouble, really. So I think that's where my mentality is at the moment. It's a case of, you know, we should be okay. We're not in the three worst teams. We do have to show it, however. I mean, Leicester, for me, were not in the three worst teams in the Prem last year on paper, but they didn't show it. And then in the end, they went down. So we don't want to be in a situation like that. The too good to go down thing doesn't exist. But there is a good enough to stay up, and I know we are most certainly good enough to stay up. So, you know, let's hope that things do improve now over the next few weeks. I mean, it has been a grueling period, a baptism of fire really for the manager when you look at, you know, who we've had to play and stuff like that. But, you know, let's hope now that we do improve, but we do also need to learn some lessons too.
Well, let's look at this. From 22nd, the first relegated spot, right the way up to 15th, which is Plymouth spot. All the teams in that section are separated by 6 points. And I'd be surprised, without going in depth, Steve, if there are any or many teams in that bunch of 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10 teams there that have a more favourable tail end to the season than us in terms of winnable games. And you could dispute what a winnable game is when you get to 41, 42 of the season, because they could argue then that you want to be playing against your 12th, 13th and 14th, the ones that are on the beach, and not the teams that are scrapping for survival.
The problem is, are they on the beach yet?
No, well, this is the thing.
That makes sense. Like, you want those teams probably more at the end, don't you?
Well, that's what I mean.
On the beach, yeah.
That's what I mean. People will look at our April and May and think, well, you want to be playing your Sheffield Wednesdays, your QPRs and whatnot, because they're the fodder of the division, if you like, right down at the bottom. But at the same time, do you want to be playing them when they need to win to survive? And that's a difficult question. That's one that is a lot harder. Yes, on quality alone, yes, we could have enough on those good days to win the game, but are you going to have the fight to go into war? And that's something we haven't seen enough of. But I do think.
But the other thing as well, you find with those teams later in the season is they're not really in a situation often where, you know, draws are acceptable. They need to go for wins. So that's the other way of looking at it. Then they're going to have more of a go at you because they're thinking this is a 6-point here. We need the points. And also, if you're playing against a team that's around you, then obviously if you can, you know, hurt them too, it's obviously a double, isn't it? 2 positives too. So that is the thing with it. I think what you're saying is, I think is fair. It probably is better really to play the lesser teams coming up now, certainly the ones that are in trouble, and then those mid-table ones. But look, the fact is you can't control the fixture list. You just got to see what hand you're dealt. So we've just got to get on with it, haven't we? But look, the fact is, the way you've got to look at it, it's certainly better not to play the top side, isn't it? So, they're all out of the way. So, yeah, that's how we have to look at it.
Yeah, we do. And as you mentioned, the fixtures just eking back down towards mid-table, the one we got coming up on the weekend, Sunderland. Surprise, surprise, they just sacked their manager before we played them. It seems like that happens all the time with us.
Yeah, it does, doesn't it? I think, didn't Stoke and Rotherham do it? I think they are too, aren't they? Not sure if it happened with anyone else this season as well. But, yeah, it is typical. It does. The whole Michael Beale thing sort of seems similar to Michael Duff, really, doesn't it? Where he might not be the worst manager in the world, but, he's come across terribly, hasn't he? And, it's not a natural fit. And his points per game isn't terrible. I don't think either. I think there were about 4 wins in 12, which, don't get me wrong, it's not brilliant, but Sunderland would have been expecting a little bit better than that. But I think he just didn't really grasp the club, the area, or anything like that. And they've obviously made the decision that it seemed likely for a little while, really. I mean, seems deeply unpopular in the northeast, and they've made a change. So. They put so they've gone with the caretaker situation, haven't they, till the end of the season. Doesn't half look like a mess. I mean, you think that it was quite a surprise, wasn't it, where with Tony Mowbray had the boot. Obviously, nobody was really expecting that, were they? And then they've obviously brought Beale.
I don't think he was disliked up there either. I think they were fond of Tony Mowbray. Obviously being from up there as well, and kind of having that.
I don't think it was a situation where the fans were trying to hound him out. There may have been a few of them not convinced or stuff like that, but they certainly weren't completely against him, were they? It seemed
not at all.
Bit of an odd one and a surprising one, really. But obviously they decided to appoint Beale, and it's not worked out at all. And now they're back to the drawing board, really, aren't they? Yeah,
they are. And we get the first stab at it on the weekend up at the Stadium of Light. It's hard to know how that'll go, but you'd expect Sunderland to have something of a reaction. I'd certainly rather be playing against a Michael Beale Sunderland, because it feels like I know what that team would have been like, and certainly not giving their all to prove themselves to a manager who they clearly weren't very fond of. But now we have that mystery, and do they have that bounce back from having a caretaker in charge now?
Yeah, I mean, sometimes it just gives you that little lift, really, doesn't it? So, and that's the annoying thing for us, isn't it? It seemed like he was deeply unpopular. I mean, you look at that social media clip from the other day where the left back has been subbed, goes to shake Beale's hand, and he just disregards him. He did apologise for it afterwards to say that he hadn't seen it, but I mean, it's just such a bad look when there's already, a certain amount of pressure on him, and you just think, well, that partly shows, I think, why he's particularly disliked, doesn't it? So, you get the feeling there'll be a lift, which is bad news for us, really. But we'll wait and see. We haven't got a bad record against Sunderland. Obviously, we did beat them twice last year. We had a draw with them at home where they did outplay us, really, and we had 10 men for a lot of it, but we did dig in. So let's hope we can continue our good run against them. Yeah,
I don't think we've had 11 men on the pitch for both teams in the last couple of visits of weeks. I'm sure they had Luke O'Nien sent off up there last season when we played against them, didn't they? So let's see what happens this time around. But how would you set up, Steve? Because we saw the return to first team action of Kikarajevic on Saturday, and Charlie Patino as well came off the bench, and it seems to be that's becoming more and more of a rare occasion. So Patino excelled, I think, when he came on. I think he very much dictated the pace of the play, really added that bit of creativity and guile in the middle of the park, which we were sorely lacking, and really galvanised, I think, the fans and the team, because everything for about 15 minutes was buzzing, wasn't it, in the stadium? And Kukarajevic put himself about, got into bustles with the defenders who, to be fair, the Ipswich back line were great. They were solid. They wouldn't give an inch, but he still put himself about and got into tussles that Yates wasn't finding himself in and stuff like that. So I'm positive about both introductions, and hoping that they can be used more regularly between now and the end of the season, because we haven't got a wealth of quality that play on the pitch every week. So anything that can add to that is a good thing.
Yeah, I didn't think Kukarevic was amazing, right? And I mean, the typical thing is that we didn't really whip as many balls into the box in the air, I didn't think, when he came on. We did from a couple of corners, but I mean, the first corner we had didn't go in then, did it? Which I couldn't believe, considering we brought our man on with height. But, yeah. So, look, I think Patino's been a strange one all season, because I think most people feel that he should have had more minutes. I mean, I certainly do. But that's not happened for whatever reason. So I think that if you want to try and dig ourselves out of trouble, you've got to be looking at Patino as someone that can make a vital contribution for us, really. So I do think he should be in the team more. I mean, I found it a bit odd at the end of the game where we had that decent opportunity from a free kick and he didn't take it. I mean, I probably would have had him on there then. I mean, look, he could be crap at free kicks, but his ability suggests to me that he could be someone that would be a threat in that situation. So, yeah, a bit odd that he didn't take it. But look, I think the strange thing was those subs sort of lifted the crowd, didn't they? It was as if to say everyone's wanted to see Kukarevic, because literally he's barely had a chance, has he? And I think Patino is someone, again, that the fans are looking at and thinking, well, just give him more minutes to see what he can do. So, yeah, I think that it certainly helped the crowd, whether we didn't create a great deal of good chances, did we? I think that was the thing. We did have some chances.
But that
not a huge amount.
That he couldn't beat the keeper. But I do think that the effort, particularly in that second half, was noticeably better than the Leeds game, where you thought, you know what? Yes, it was a sodden day. Everyone got absolutely soaked and the pitch was tore up to pieces. It had that feel a little bit more of a scrap of a game, as opposed to just down in tools and waiting for the full-time whistle. We did seem to put a little bit out there a bit more, didn't we?
Yeah, I would definitely say that. I mean, we could have had something from the game. I think that is fair to say, but obviously we didn't manage to get anything. But yeah, it was better than what we've seen. I think you'd have to say that. And I think now it's just that bit of a relief that certain fixtures are out of the way, really. But as you said, you've got to beware of thinking, that there's been a lot of recently, and you don't want to be just thinking to yourself, we've, that those games are a write-off, because that isn't the way to think. And, we
do you remember when we got relegated from the Premier League and we seemed to down tools for 4 or 5 games, looking ahead to the Southampton game?
Yeah.
And we did win the Southampton game. And then you're like, this is why we should have been competing in the other games.
No,
because you cannot just gamble on one.
You can turn on and off. I still remember to this day, I think you were with me on this one, we went to West Brom and they had 1 win in 30. Right. They were definitely going to go down. And they scored. We did equalise, didn't we? And then I remember Carvalhal coming over at the end as if giving a bit of a thumbs up thing. It's like, we've had a good result here. And I'm thinking, Carlos, this is not a good result, my friend. They've been on shocking form. I'm not saying you should come over here and basically play things down hugely or anything and try and, worry people. But at the same time, you can't be coming over here and saying this is a great result, because it most certainly was not. I mean, you've got to be looking at that as one of the ones that sent us down. And as you say, I think we took a pace to Man City, didn't we? I remember losing home to Chelsea. I think we might have lost to United. And it just felt like we'd switched off because there was a big gap to the bottom. And then all of a sudden, you're in it. You've got to switch back on. And it's quite difficult to do. And we didn't manage to do it. And you'll have to say we deservedly went down.
And that is the risk that could happen this season if we allow ourselves to get into that position where we say, it's fine we lose against Sunderland this weekend, or it's fine if we don't get results against Cardiff and Bristol, because don't worry, because we've got the bottom 4 to come up in April. And you're thinking, well, then you need to win all of them then. And if you can't win all of them games, then you're going to be around the bottom 3. So you don't want to leave yourself in a position where you simply have to win those 6-pointers.
Yeah, the old must-wins, isn't it?
Almost wins. Would you make any changes from the start 11, having seen what you've seen over the last few days?
It's a good question, that.
Put Patino in, maybe?
Possibly. I mean, but I'd be more tempted to leave Grimes in for now. Because I do wonder, could we go Allen and Patino in a game further down the line? I mean, I think because Sunderland's a tough one, I think maybe we need to be, I maybe wouldn't put Patino in. I think I'd be looking at the Blackburn game the week after as maybe one where we could potentially start him. I mean, I didn't think Ollie Cooper was brilliant the other day. I mean, could Placheta come back in there maybe? When you're looking at Sago as well and thinking he's come in, I mean, we haven't really seen a great deal of him. Is it worth giving him a start? I mean, he's bound to show more from the start, you would have thought, if you give him an opportunity. So that's something that maybe we could do.
Would you be dropping Ronald in that instance then? Because obviously he has come in and shown a bit of fight and a little bit of quality where there's been an absolute absence of it elsewhere.
Oh, you're right. Could you play them both? Could one play on the left, for example? I don't know. I'm just thinking out loud here, really, in terms of who's the options that we have. I mean, I think I'd like to see Darlin come back in. I mean, again, I think Norton, best days are behind him, if we're going to be honest about it. I think sometimes he was getting caught out the other day. Maybe with Darlin have to play right back, maybe he will. I mean, it's like a cursed area for us at the moment. Can't wait for someone to come back. I mean, I think Parker obviously is a way off. I think we're going to see him maybe till next season now, but I mean, hopefully Key is closer, because that would make a difference for us. Or then, plus, like I said, Darlin could then play centre half, so that would help as well. So, I mean, there is, because we have got so many players, I mean, there are options for the manager. Not all of them are brilliant, but some of the ones that I've named there are ones that maybe could be, pushing to get in the team.
Yeah, no, I agree with that. I do think that it'll be wise to the players that came on. You talk about Sago Junior, we mentioned Patino there, Kukurevic, another one, that if they don't get into the starting 11, Placheta again, those sort of players, they're all players that can offer an attacking impetus. And that sort of players that you need to be willing to bring off the bench if we aren't in a position of strength going into the last 30, 35 minutes of the game at Stadium of Light. Then we should have a bench that will reflect that. And we should have a bench that will allow us to get back into the game. Because you can name so many subs now. You need to be bold and be able to use them, because we do have those sorts of players. We did bring in a bit of pace in January. And you hope that we'll get ourselves into a position where Luke Williams will be bringing him on and saying, listen, go at them. Because we played well against Hull the last time we were on the road, Steve. And maybe, home hasn't been particularly kind to us. So hopefully being on the roads will be a welcome distraction for our players.
Yeah, like you say, I mean, our home record is poor. I think it's only 4 wins, isn't it? Which is awful, really. It's been one of the most miserable seasons. Like I said this the other day, since the year we nearly went out with the Football League, there's just not been many particular highlights, is there? It's been a slog. So yeah, maybe playing away will help us. And obviously, as you say, we did win at Hull. I think we have had more away wins than home, which maybe tells us something. I think our away record overall probably isn't horrific. I mean, we're probably nowhere near the bottom 3 for that. We might well be at the bottom 3 for the home one. So yeah, let's hope that we can take that, the fact that we have done a little bit better away from home, into the game on the weekend.
Yeah, so as ever, Steve, I'm going to ask you to end on a positive note, just to lift the spirits of everyone who's still listening.
Okay, so anyone that's going on the weekend, some might well be going to Newcastle and enjoying the nightlife. Well, that would be brilliant. So yeah, that's always worth a trip. I mean, like I said, the way to look at it is the fixtures are a little bit easier now. So Sunderland not in a great vein of form themselves. There's I know the manager's gone now, which is frustrating for us, but they're not in a great moment. So let's just see what happens. But the main thing is that very tough run that we've been talking about is almost at an end now. It certainly is at an end for the very top clubs. So there can't be anyone else in this league, or maybe one or two who played the top 4 twice. So that has to be a good thing from our point of view.
Yeah, agreed. Hope for happier times going forward, starting on Saturday. Let's hope. Thanks. If you're still with us, thank you so much for listening to this. We'll come back next week, I believe, Steve, to talk about that and look ahead to the fixtures that come up. And they do get tasty when we're looking into March. So there's plenty to look forward to there. And I'm sure...
Well, you say look forward. Let's be debatable about this. Maybe. It might not be. We'll see.
Yeah, we'll see. But from myself and Steve, thanks so much for listening, and we'll speak to you again soon. Bye-bye.